And we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warrant Committee, February 5, 2024. Madam Secretary, would you please take attendance?
Sure. We have Dave Humphreys, Tom Caldwell, Lori Connolly, Jay Fundling, Julie Joyce, Tim Lyons, Julia Maxwell, Steve Rhines, Amanda Serio, and Ron Sia.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We only have one agenda item on tonight, and that's a presentation, if you will, by Nick Milano, Town Administrator. I asked him to give us, an update on budget, where we're at, and then also on expected warrant articles that we will have at our annual town meeting. So we're not going to have much of a, we're definitely not voting on anything. And it's kind of early even for us to have much of a discussion on anything because we're just finding out what a lot of these things are now. But I guess, Nick, thanks for joining us. If you kindly would please share with us what you have. I guess if it's okay with you, if we could just start on the budget, give us the overall budget picture and what we think we're going to have to address at town meeting, if you will.
Sure. I can start us off with the budget discussion. I will share my screen. I have a quick presentation to just do kind of an overview of revenues, expenditures, where things presently stand, and kind of what the next steps are from my perspective in terms of what I need to get you. So I'll start there. I'll run through it. If you want to stop me midway and ask questions, fire away, or happy to obviously take questions at the end as well. Give me a second. Let me just get the screen going here. So appreciate you having me down. I did send around a couple of the prior presentations I've done for some of the joint finance committees, the Select Board Finance Committee, the School Committee Finance Subcommittee. So a lot of the information will be similar to that if anybody's looked at those. Always happy to talk budget. So folks, if you're new or just want a refresher on anything municipal finance related, feel free to reach out. Happy to sit down with you, myself, Amy Dexter, Finance Director. Happy to take any time as necessary to talk through the budget, either big picture or really kind of line item by line item. So feel free to reach out for that by email, stop by the office, whatever works for you. All right, so I'm going to talk through a couple of the revenue sources first, just to give everybody that background. So property tax is obviously our main source of revenue, about 75% of the money that the town brings in. As you can see here, I'm showing fiscal 24 in one column, fiscal 25's estimate in the other. The way our property tax sources are limited by state law in Massachusetts is we can only increase our levy by 2.5% a year. So that's where you see we take last year's total levy that we assessed against property tax payers, and we can increase that by 2.5%. So we have done so for fiscal 25. And then the other source of new property tax revenue is new growth, additions, new construction, whatever that is in terms of new buildings in Milton or new personal property. Last year, that amounted to about $1.2 million of taxable new growth. This year, we budgeted $850,000 as we expect some of the growth to slow down, but we'll refresh that over the next couple of weeks if we feel it has room to move upwards. Recent projects that you might be thinking about in terms of new growth would be the Walcott Woods, which is a 55-plus residential community, the project down on Central and Elliott, 131 Elliott, which again is a newer project that came online. And then in terms of projects that's going on right now that would show up in new growth for fiscal 25 is the 40B project. And if anybody's driven down Blue Hills Parkway lately, it is taken off there on Blue Hills Parkway at the old ice house across from Guile Road. So that's new growth. We've also showing debt exclusion, so money that we're raising on the taxes to pay for certain debt projects. Those are paying for the fire station projects that are undergoing. The fire department just moved into the new fire headquarters last Tuesday, so we're excited to see that done. The other debt exclusions of the school projects in the early 2000s, and then the library project. So those are the other sources of taxable revenue that we have here. So our total levy for next year is about $101 million. So overall, that's an increase of about 3 million, 3.2, 3.3 of new revenue for the town to spend on its departmental budgets. The other major revenue category, and I'm just showing a high-level summary here, is local receipts. So this is like motor vehicle excise taxes, building permits and fees, trash payments for your trash, whether you get the cart for the year and you pay the yearly bill, or whether you buy stickers. The other items that go into this are like pilot payments. So there's a whole category of local receipts. At the close of fiscal 23, we brought in about $10.7 million in local receipts, which, as you can tell, significant jump from the prior year. One issue on the local receipts I want to point out is when COVID hit, communities around the country, around the state, slashed their local receipt estimates because we thought the impact on local revenues might be pretty significant. But as you can tell, they continue to grow. Maybe a slight slowdown in fiscal 20, but continue to grow. So we've increased those projections each year to try to catch back up to where we were in terms of what we bring in actual and what we actually estimate. The main driver for the big jump in fiscal 23 was income from earnings on investments, which really for a municipality is interest income. Everybody's seeing the high interest rates, whether you're got a savings account, a good one, or trying to refinance. We're benefiting from that, as you can see in fiscal 23. Earnings on the town's funds that it has at banks was through the roof, close to $800,000. So as you can see though, this really fluctuates around. We feel good for fiscal 24 that will surpass the $400,000. We already have done so far this year. So this is a place where we might adjust this based on our long-term forecast for where interest rates might be. There's talk that rates are going to start going down, but we haven't seen that come yet. So big picture on local receipts is that we've increased our revenue forecast over the past few years. It's about $10 million in revenue that we can count on. The last big category that I'm going to talk about is state aid. So, typically we talk about this in terms of Chapter 70 education aid to our schools. There's also an account for aid, just general aid to local governments. It's called unrestricted general government aid. They use the acronym UGA. It's pretty ridiculous, but just so you know what that is, that's a couple $1 million. Chapter 70 it totals around 15. So what has changed this year from the past two especially is that state growth has slowed down. This news article that I'm showing here is from 59 minutes ago. I pulled it not too long ago as part of this presentation. So this news about the January tax revenues at the state level came out today that they lagged another 263 million behind their forecast. State had already downgraded its revenue forecast and have further decreased that. And despite decreasing those revenue forecasts, they didn't hit those marks in the past month of January. And their January revenues are actually below what they brought in last year. So that's just a big intro to say that growth on the state front has slowed down, and that has an impact on our revenues as well in terms of state aid. In fiscal 25, we're going to return to, quote unquote, minimum aid status for Chapter 70 education aid, which means our growth in state aid for education from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25, which is the budget year we're planning for, is only going to increase for $30 per student. It's about $130,000. We're going to be one of 199 communities that receive that small increase. Last year, by contrast, I think it was 111 received the minimum aid. So you can see there's a real trend in terms of less state education aid dollars available for the new year. And overall, our net state aid, so there's aid that comes to the town, and then the state assesses us for various items. The big one being MBTA assessment. So we're going to see a reduction in net amount of money that comes to Milton from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25. Doesn't happen very often. It's just speaking to an overall trend of slowdown in revenues and aid across the state. So as you can see in the last couple of years, the increase in state aid was over 8% or over 9%. This year we're looking at a 3.3, which is more in line with the historical average. One element that is important to mention is the state changed the Chapter 70 education formula a few years ago under what's called the Student Opportunity Act. That pushed, more money to districts that had student enrollment and population and demographics like Milton. But we're seeing that increase from the Student Opportunity Act really slow down. So here's just a history of showing our net state aid figures. So total aid, receipts minus assessments is over 12 million, but going down from 24 to 25. And you can see some of the big jumps that have happened in recent years. And Milton's really benefited from state aid in the last several years, but we're seeing that slow down. This next chart isn't great, but I just wanted to show you like the percent increase year over year across the state. So as you can tell, this 3.3% increase that we're seeing in fiscal 25 is a lot more in keeping with what is the typical norm. Those big increases over the past few years are a little outside of the norm, but needless to say, it's unfortunate. We would certainly like to see more education aid coming to, more overall state aid, particularly education aid coming to Milton. That's not happening in fiscal 25, and the reason I pulled that news article out is because I wouldn't be optimistic that this changes significantly moving forward. Sometimes we'll see these numbers change as budgets come out. The governor released her budget. The House of Representatives releases their budget in April. The Senate releases their budget in May, and finally there's an agreed upon budget at the end of the day. In past years, the numbers have come in higher than we've expected. And while there may be some adjustment to these, I don't expect huge substantial changes. I'd be more than happy to be wrong on that. Last thing, or not last thing, but one of the other items I want to touch on is free cash. So essentially the money we have left over at the end of each fiscal year for fiscal 24, we had at the close of fiscal 22, and the calendar is a little tricky to follow, but basically for last year's budget, we had $4.4 million in free cash to use. This year, our free cash to use in the fiscal 25 budget is $3.3 million. 400,000 of that has been appropriated at the December special town meeting for the school project. They're working on designer selection for that now. So the number really is $2.9 million left. I wanted to touch quickly on stabilization funds. All right, Steve, I saw your hand go up. I'm happy to take questions now, or if you'd rather wait, whichever you'd like to do.
Just a quick question, Nick. Thanks for the stats, really helpful. Quick question for status on the Article 97 approval. Where is that? Do you have an update for that, or did you give that at the end?
Yeah, so the home rule petition, or the Article 97 legislation for that has been filed. That's at the legislature. It's been referred to a committee, Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, I think is the name of it. So it's awaiting a hearing, which is the first stop in the legislative process, but it's been filed and is awaiting any further action.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I did want to throw out the stabilization fund. So we have 3 stabilization funds: general, capital, and road. No real policies in place that govern the use of these. There's really also no policy that says, what our target for these should be. Historically, the town has sought to have about a $5 million balance in its stabilization funds. The big one is general, and then we have about $1 million in capital and a couple $100,000 of a road stabilization fund that was set up a couple of years ago. As a percent of budget, we're hovering right around that 5% mark, which is good. But as budgets grow, that percentage changes unless we put money into stabilization. And we certainly want to make sure that stays strong at about that 5% number. Because with the state's growth slowing down, who knows where budgets could be in future years. The economy is really strong. We're not seeing any slowdown. It's just the state tax collections have been an issue. And then this is just getting into where we're at in terms of the budget. So we had asked all departments, town departments, school departments, to provide us a level service budget. So take the services you're providing, the level of service that you have now, your same staffing, and adjust it for any contractual obligations that you might have, and provide that for us. So, no new employees, no dramatically changed scope of services from any department. We've also asked for a needs-based budget. So, picture where your department should be in a year, what staffing is appropriate, and give us those numbers. So we have both of those, and we've been working through those. Some recent changes that we've made to our budgets, as I've discussed here. I've talked about the increase to local receipts. I've talked about incorporating Governor Healy's budget proposal for state aid. The one big change on the expenditure side was that health insurance, we had plugged at an 8% increase. We've been able to, decrease that to a 5% increase. Every percentage point is about $100,000, $120,000 of cost. So every percent that comes down, it saves good money. The other change I should flag here is also related to school enrollment. The enrollment at Blue Hills Regional Vocational Technical High School is down. So they were about 37 students 2 years ago, 51 students for Milton last year, 34 this year. So as that number fluctuates, so does our assessment to Blue Hills. We expect that number to drop, but we don't have an updated assessment from Blue Hills. So that's a place where we expect some of the numbers to get better since our enrollment is down, but hasn't been incorporated yet. And as I was mentioning, so we've taken all our revenues, we've put them in a big pot. We've taken all expenditures for level service, put them together, and where that leaves us today is trying to close this $3.9 million deficit. And the way we're going to get there is through, incorporating one-time funds such as free cash for operating budgets or one-time expenses that are in our fiscal 25 budget, reducing requests, budgetary requests, and potential fee increases. So we have a meeting of the joint finance committees, the select board finance committee and the school committee finance subcommittee scheduled for February 15th. And I plan to make a presentation on a proposed balanced budget at that meeting. And as I mentioned before, we have received significant requests for additional funding to provide additional services across town school departments. But right now we're targeting that balanced budget proposal. The only thing that changes this dynamic is the override, or a potential override, the word override. That would certainly result in additional tax income or tax revenue if an override were to pass. It would enable the town to invest in additional services rather than just level service. But at this time, I don't have any. At this time, we're working on a balanced budget. If that changes, we'll certainly keep the warrant committee apprised. But at this time, there's no discussion in terms of taking next steps on that. That could certainly change. But for now, we're working towards a balanced budget. I think that is all I had on the budget. I know I went through that a little quickly, but wanted to try to step back and take a big picture look at it. Happy to dive into any questions folks might have, or as I said, I'm always available if you'd like to shoot me an email or come by the office or give me a call.
Tom.
Mr. Chair, hi, Mr. Milano, Tom Caldwell. I just noticed in the slide, and I know it's just a big picture thing, but the governor's budget proposal for local receipts, if it does pass, you were referring to rising costs like of the local fees, right? Excise tax, that type of thing.
So I'm sorry. Say that again. I don't know if I followed you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The governor's budget proposal that you indicated on one of your slides,
Yep.
it supported that proposal. And I was just wondering, that's as to the raising of local receipts, right? Like the excise tax and other fees?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, so a couple of things. So tended to take it piece by piece, and I'll just go back to the slide.
Yeah, I was just, I don't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious in terms of what would be supported in that as a whole.
Okay, yeah.
And what
So,
specifically.
the governor's budget that's been submitted includes the state aid numbers that we discussed, where we expect a $30 per pupil increase for Milton and the net state aid to go down year over year. So that's where her budget proposal lands. The governor also released a bill called the Municipal Empowerment Bill to allow cities and towns to change some local options that we have around tax revenue, or I'm sorry, really fee revenue that would go into our local receipts projection. So she proposed changing the law around motor vehicle excise to allow municipalities, if town meeting approves, to add a 5% surcharge. So say you have a, 2014 Camry like myself, your excise bill is $50 a year. That would allow the city or town to assess me another 5% on top of that. So my motor vehicle excise bill would go from $50 to $52.50. So whatever your motor vehicle excise tax bill would be 5% higher. So that's one change she has put forward. She's put 2 additional changes around the meals tax, which is an option we have in town, which generates several $100,000s of revenue for us to increase that. So right now it's 0.75% tax on meals. So she's proposed increasing that cap from 0.75 to 1%. So on a $100 bill at a restaurant, you pay 1% would go to the town of Milton. We've adopted it, so we get 75 cents now on a $100 bill. So that's another change she's made, which would generate additional tax revenue for the town. And then the last one, or I should say, change she proposed. And then I think those are the 2 that would affect Milton. So along with her budget, she has filed a bill to change some of these laws. That has not passed yet. It could. I don't see it impacting fiscal 25, even if it were to get passed, because that's going to take some time to get through, take some time to be effective. Town meeting would have to approve, and then it would have to go into effect. So any of those potential changes might be further down the road. And Tom, I think if that's what you're asking, sorry if I keep that in a different direction.
No, it was. I just wanted to clarify. I was aware of a couple of them, but I didn't know if there was anything else out there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's the motor vehicle excise, the big one. The meals tax is the other one. There's a lot of other stuff. It's really exciting for folks in positions like mine, but aren't big ticket items that could change our budget in meaningful ways. It would make life easier for folks in municipalities. But those are the 2 kind of the headline ones that that got a lot of notice that would generate additional revenue for towns like Milton.
Thank you.
Jay.
Can I ask a question? Hi, this is Jay. I've we've had some budget shared with us, and you've shared some information with me. I think one of the big items that I haven't seen is capital non-bonded, I guess specifically. Sure. What are we looking at there, both dollars and stuff? And dollars and
yeah,
what is it buying?
No, that's a good point. I should have mentioned that. So the capital budget is typically funded through free cash, which Jay was referencing, the non-bonded capital items. So those would be items that we buy outright, smaller vehicles, things that don't have a long useful life or a little bit cheaper. Bigger items like a facilities renovation project we would typically bond because we can pay that over a longer duration of time. We had a meeting of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee where I walked through what the requests were. We have likewise scheduled a follow-up meeting of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee for February 15th. I think I got that date right. Where they've asked me to make a recommendation on what items I recommend be funded. At that meeting, in our last meeting where we discussed it, I suggested that we carve out about $950,000 in free cash for capital. Last year, of the 4.4, we used about 1.2 million. This year, where I've targeted in terms of free cash for capital, about 950,000 of the what was 3.3, which is now 2.9 million dollars in free cash. And then there are many additional requests that won't get funded. There are some items that will get funded through borrowing. 2 big ones that I should just mention are the school committee has requested $2 million to add additional space at Cunningham in attic space. And so that would be a bigger ask on the capital budget from a borrowing perspective. The other one is our annual $1 million, that we use for roads. That's something we really don't want to touch. We get enough complaints about roads in Milton that we want to make sure that we're continuing to put money back into them. So right there is $3 million in potential bonded capital items. So there we plan to include some additional to that. But the big picture is right now about 950,000 free cash for capital is what I'm slating, plus or minus, and then we'll have some bonded items as well in addition to the 2 that I've mentioned.
Okay. Can I ask for the 950? Did you? Did you come up with the? Sorry if I'm peeking behind the curtain. Did you come up with the 950 as a good number and then ask the capital committee, what do you want? Or did you look at the things and decide there are $950,000 worth of things we need?
Yeah, it's more the latter, looking at the requests and figuring out what we should move forward with in fiscal 25. I think there will certainly be items that we are just unable to fund this year. Our capital budget is really about replacements. That's really what we do. It's not very often where we're buying new equipment or expanding our capital equipment. So we're just trying to maintain, and obviously things that you push off further down the line would be just another project that is deferred maintenance and might get more expensive as we go here. But yeah, so that's really generated from looking at what the requests are, looking at what our free cash number is, using approximately the same percentage as last year, which I thought was a good balance, and trying to hit those items that folks really need for fiscal 25.
Thank you.
Judy?
See me. That's cute. Can you hear me, Nick?
I can hear you. How's it going?
Okay, perfect. I heard Jay mention that he's seen some parts of the budget already, even though it hasn't come to us. Where can we look this up?
We had Amy Dexter distributed the information, but we'll get that back out to everybody and make sure everybody has it. And if you have any issues accessing it, you need something in hard copy, you know where to find us. Come stop by and we'll get it to you.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
See you this week.
You expected as much.
Okay, can I ask another question? It's getting a little bit in the weeds, but it's
Sure.
about the special purpose debt stabilization.
Yep.
And there's a lot about this subject I don't know. But when I
Okay.
look at, again, the sort of more detailed budget information that I got, I noticed it was a hit to the operating budget 2 years ago. It was not a hit to the operating budget last year, and it is again this year. By this year, I mean the budget we're looking at. And
Correct.
there's a lot I don't understand about this subject, but I really don't understand why it would hit the operating budget, especially only sometimes.
Yes, so I will, I'm trying to find the sheet that would be really easy to kind of explain this. So what Jay's asking about is, I don't quite know which year, but several years ago when the fire station and the DPW yard project were kind of on folks' radar, but before they were real projects, the town approved a home rule petition that was ultimately approved by the legislature that would allow the creation of a special purpose debt stabilization fund. So what it did was it took a fiscal year and said, as of this year, Milton will continue to assess taxes as if it still had principal and interest payments on its school and library projects. But as our debt service dropped, that difference, so those savings, would go into a special purpose debt stabilization fund. And then those funds would be used to help pay the debt service for the DPW and fire station projects that were anticipated to come. So that's kind of the big picture structure of it, is that the law sets fiscal 18 as kind of like the benchmark. And in fiscal 18, we had $2.329 million in debt service for the schools and library projects. Since then, as we continue to pay those bonds down, we have savings on that, and we're no longer paying 2.3 towards those. So that delta goes into the special purpose debt stabilization fund. Now it's fiscal 24, fiscal 25. We have expenses associated with the fire station projects. So we're using our available space under that law to pay for the debt service on the fire station projects. And we're using those funds in the special purpose debt stabilization fund to also pay for that debt service. So the way it's showing up that way now is because it's essentially a plug. It's not the actual amount that we'll spend. We haven't quite finalized that, and we have some meetings with the financial advisor, but ultimately what happens is in fiscal year 25, we're gonna tax the residents $2.329 million, as we have for the last 5 years, as we are allowed to under this law. And we'll use that plus what is in the stabilization fund to pay debt service on the fire stations. So I'd agree we head off into the weeds a bit here. That can get a little confusing. I have a sheet that might explain it that I will pull up if I can, but let me just see, it'll pop up here.
I mean, I guess how I've been imagining it is we take that money, we dedicate it to a certain account, literally or figuratively, we put it in that account, and when we need it, we pull it out. So that's why I'm surprised to see it hitting the operating budget.
It's not, we just need to show where it's going. So essentially, all of it nets out. So everything we raise for this is then spent in the budget. Last year, there was a small appropriation out of the stabilization fund. And then this year, we expect an appropriation out of the stabilization fund as well.
Nick, it's Lori.
Hey, Lori.
This is the Hurley amendment you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
So,
Should have used that phrasing correctly.
that's all right. Does this ever go away? Or will we always keep this funding here? And it was set up so we could do the fire station and DPW yard. But when
Correct.
those projects are complete, are the residents
Yep.
going to see any money back in their pocket? Or are
Yeah.
we going to keep funding it? And does it have to be voted upon?
Yes. So Lori's getting at kind of the crux of this is what would typically happen is that as those library and school projects were paid, everybody would see those savings on their tax bill. What Milton did instead said was rather than that dollar value go down for a couple of years and then shoot back up, let's just hold it steady. So there aren't major fluctuations in tax bills. So to answer your question, yes, there's a couple of items in that. So the first is that it can only be spent. This source can only be used for fire station projects, which is our current plan. You know, fire headquarters is down East Milton is slated to start to be next, followed by the Atherton station, or a DPW yard project. However, there's a cap that the maximum amount of debt that we can issue under this is a $50 million cap. So let's say there's, you know, just to use round numbers, this isn't real at all. Say it was a 50 million fire headquarters project, then this would be maxed out and we'd have to come up with a different source. So there's a $50 million cap. It can only be used for the fire stations or the DPW yard, only if town meeting and the voters approve it, which they have done up to this point. And then lastly is once the projects are complete, there's a process there by which obviously we no longer tax, and then this Department of Revenue and the town ensure that any funds in the stabilization fund are put to the projects in question or put to lowering the tax bills for residents for other debt issued projects going forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Nick, if I could ask, like, timeline, like, when are we gonna get the big town budget so that we can, because, you know, we're hearing rumors of a potential Proposition 2.5 override. So I'd imagine we'd have to have a couple different budgets to be looking at. Like, what are your thoughts on that? What's the timeline to get this, you know, before the town, you know, at town meeting, annual town
Sure.
meeting?
So the departmental budget that we've shared has everybody's level service request and it has their supplemental needs asks. So folks who want to meet with departments, you're obviously free to do so at your convenience with the information that's there. In terms of what the town administrator's recommended budget would be, you know, I'm working on that balanced budget presentation. I expect to make that on February 15th. The select board meets on February 27th. So if we're heading in a different direction on a needs-based budget with an override, I expect to hear that by then. But, you know, I would say that we will have a balanced budget proposal for the select board on February 27th, which, if approved, would be transmitted in its entirety to the warrant committee at that point. And then, you know, as you've mentioned, if there's an alternative pathway that folks are considering, I'm sure that will, we all need a decision on that. If it's the direction the board wants to go in, I expect it would happen around that 27th meeting. But as I said, you know, my goal is to have that balanced budget ready and done and good to go. For a town meeting, yes, there would be two budgets. You know, there would be the phrase contingent, non-contingent, or override, non-override budgets. So the warrant committee would have two to review and chime in on if that's the pathway, but there's nothing saying that's where we're headed right now. So we're working on that balanced budget, just one for everybody to review and make a recommendation on for a town meeting.
Got it, thank you, perfect. Does anybody, Judy, you look like you have a question. Judy?
I do.
Yeah.
I seem to be having a confusing night. The override will go to the town for a vote, so the town meeting will just authorize it to go to the vote. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's really a three-step process.
Okay.
Select board to call for one, for lack of a better phrasing. Town meeting to approve a budget contingent upon an override ballot question. So, and it goes in that order: select board, town meeting, ballot question for all the voters to vote on.
Okay. But that, okay, I'm done. Maybe I should have taken a longer nap today. The override itself will be for not 25 fiscal year, but 26 fiscal year?
No,
No.
the next upcoming budget is for fiscal 25, so it starts July 1, 24 through June 30th of 25. So the fiscal 25 budget is the one we're working on now.
Okay, so we send the normal budget to the town meeting. We vote and say, yeah, all DPW, school, every single need of the town on the budget. We say, yeah, go for it in town meeting. But then there's this override. So essentially if it is yes at the ballot box, then will you have to realign the budget?
So what we do, if we go in that direction, if town meeting approves a budget that would require a yes at the ballot, because in order to do a Prop 2.5 override, it must be approved at a ballot initiative by the town.
Right.
So we would pass a ballot. If it goes that way, town meeting would approve a budget that would be contingent upon a yes vote at the ballot initiative, the
Yeah.
ballot.
So let's just pretend that it's a no. I have no
If it were
crystal ball
no-
here, so
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
Then what would happen? We would stick to the original numbers for 25?
If I can show you something that might help.
Yeah, can you?
So let's take a look at the
Jay?
warrant that we voted on.
I have never been involved in
Right.
town government when there's been one of these overrides. They just go to the ballot and. I see
So
that.
for the viewers at home, we're taking a look at the 2017 warrant that went in front of town meeing.
Okay.
You need a magic board. You should get like one of those magic,
Your imagination is the greatest board there is. So we're looking at, just like most years, we see, okay, what was the actual a couple of years ago? What's the year we're currently in? And then usually we would see, okay, what are we approving for next year? But in 2017, we had two things that we're approving for next year. We had non-contingent. We said if the override does not pass, okay, we're looking at fire department. No, not fire department, inspectional services. If the override did not pass, they would have $430,000 in salaries and wages. If the override does pass, they get $430,000 plus an extra $52,000.
Got it.
So town meeting says yes or no to that.
to this original thing, and then if it's a yes, we tack that on because that was voted on at the town meeting.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
tack it on.
Town meeting saying yes to the whole thing,
Right.
which is saying it's gonna be this
So
ordinance.
if it's a no, then the budget would not include those numbers.
Mhm.
That simple.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jack.
All right, so we kind of have a timeline. Jay?
I have a request, and for people who find me boring, this is a good time to take a bathroom break, go stretch, something like that. So, Nick, as you know, the way our health insurance works is there's a big bucket of money out there, our health insurance trust, I'll call it, and every month we pay premiums into that trust for our employees. We pay them and the employees pay them. We put money into that bucket, and every month the employees go to the doctor, and the doctor sends a bill to the health insurance, and money comes out of that bucket. So every month and every year there's money going in the bucket and money going out of the bucket, and you hope it sort of evens out over time. My request is for some sort of exhibit for all of us to be able to look at and understand that sees, okay, how big is this bucket? Has it been going up over the past couple of years? Has it been going down? Just to see how that money's flowing, because I noticed 2 years ago, I must say, 2 years ago when we set the budget, we did not increase the health insurance. We did not increase the health insurance cost. Last year, we did not increase the health insurance cost. To me, I suspect, and this is perfectly fine, that it's not that health insurance stayed exactly 100% flat. I sort of suspect our health costs were a little bit lower than we thought they would be. So two things from that. One is I'm even more optimistic than you are that our health care costs will not increase very much this year. But also I'd just like to see, are we putting more money into that bucket than we're taking out year after year? We have a little bit of conservatism built in that, and what does that mean? So I would love an exhibit like that that is so straightforward that everybody in this committee can look at and see what's going on with health
You
insurance.
can, I know Amy's working on that for you. We'll let you take a look at it and make sure it looks straightforward to you and share that with folks. Just to kind of add to that is, if you recall, part of that $4.4 million free cash figure at the close of 22 was a big health insurance turnback. Can't speak to what was driving the budget then, but we did have we had much lower than anticipated costs that year, which resulted in us paying less premiums than anticipated, resulting in our health insurance budget being about $1 million high. We adjusted that was adjusted for fiscal 23. Again, as Jay mentioned, the 0% premium increase last year. The trust is doing well. Claims this year have been in good shape. And we can present something that kind of ties that out a little bit more clearly for folks.
Appreciate it.
It's a good place to be. I know not everybody's in the same place with 0% premium increases. We're happy to be there, and obviously the employees pay into it too. So when we're able to have a 0%, that means their take-home income isn't being hit year over year, which we like to do when we can.
Can I ask one more thing? Since I guess I hate the silence. And I don't even know if this is going to affect this budget we're looking at, but a few months ago, we gave the school building committee $400,000, I believe. Going forward, if we're giving the school building committee money for architects, whatever, can that be bonded? Because that's going towards a school that's going to last for decades, in the same way that concrete and wood is. So I don't know if that's a comment or a question or what, but.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's different ways to approach this phase of the project. We've chosen, because of the money they had and a prior appropriation of $275,000, the building committee felt they could get to a point where they could bring a building project to the town for a vote if they had an additional $400,000. So we felt free cash was inappropriate because total all in, somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 to get to a townwide vote on it. It certainly could be bonded. I don't anticipate an additional, there could be, let me put it, I don't anticipate an additional appropriation prior to an up or down vote on a school project. If there were, it would probably be for additional design money. And at that time, it would be a question of, is it a couple $100,000 or is it 5 million? And just to kind of use round numbers. If it's the latter, bonding would probably be the better route, obviously. But no, point is taken. Our comparison is typically MSBA projects. It's typically cities and towns are appropriating free cash to get through that first portion of the MSBA project. We've kind of followed that same routine here. But it's a good point about, it could have been a borrowing thing or a borrowing authorization. We just went with the free cash route because the money was there to use it, and it was not a $1 million plus ask at this point.
Thank you.
Tim,
Hi, Nick, question. All the money the school committee's asking for, have we recently or ever, have we done an audit on residency for all the students?
I'm going to defer, I can't speak to that. You can certainly follow up with the superintendent. I can ask him that I received this question at a meeting and ask somebody from the school department to follow up with you. That's a question better directed to the school department.
Okay.
And I
one other
believe they
question also.
received that question in prior years and responded to it.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question.
Yep.
Have you guys ever looked at, on the trash side, how much we're paying a tip per ton for MSW as opposed to recycle? Are we getting any money back on the recycle, or is it getting diverted as MSW once it hits the recycle center?
Unfortunately, we are paying substantial on the recycling side right now. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. They are in the town meeting warrant from last year. But we're in a long-term contract on our tipping fee. Currently, a few more years on that. And then in terms of recycling, that payment, our costs fluctuate depending on what the market's doing. Right now, the market's not friendly, as you're indicating. And our costs in recycling have been high for the past several years at this point. And I'm just trying to find the sheet.
Do you know a diversion rate?
I can ask Chase Berkeley, DPW director, to follow up with you. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. So I know some other towns have stopped recycling because the diversion rate was higher than expected, and the revenue rate to offset recycling wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. No, I think we're in the same ballpark in terms of the revenue's not good at all, and we're paying. Collection and processing of curbside recycling is 1.3. Trash disposal is about 750,000. Collection of trash is about 800,000. So it's pretty comparable. I don't have the tonnage in front of me to answer that very well. If you want to give Chase a call, or I'll just mention that you had these questions, and the two of you, if you want to connect, he'll be happy to talk. All things trash.
That'd be great.
Sure. I'll connect the two of you on an email, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
That's all I got.
thanks, Tim. Tim, you should follow up
Thank you.
on that. I know Chase Berkeley would be very happy to spend the time. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Oh, I will. I worked in the industry for 12 years, so
Great.
know how it goes.
Okay. Does anybody else have any, so we're kind of trying to get a bird's eye view of the budget, where we're at. Does anybody have any other questions? If we don't, I like, maybe we can get the big reveal on warrant articles that we're looking at, Nick?
Sure. I have just a doc here that I'll share. Big reveal. It's not too exciting, but I think that's a good thing sometimes. So what I have here is just a word
Large print, please.
showing what's an article.
Large print.
So we have obviously a batch of annual recurring articles related to the budget. So those have all been approved for inclusion on the town meeting warrant. So I won't go through those. I'll just highlight community preservation. Their project recommendation, that was new last year. That was the first time that they had that. They're gonna have it this year. They have voted their recommendation. So in terms of coordinating a meeting and doing an article, that might be one to kind of move to the top of the list. They've been done for a little while. As you'll recall from the December town meeting, it was dissolved with a motion that said that the articles that weren't yet acted upon would be moved to the May town meeting. So those have been incorporated here. It's Articles 3, 6, 7, and 8 from the December town meeting. 2 that have been approved for inclusion. I shared some information about the opt-in specialized code. The select board approved that for inclusion last week. So just in terms of a really quick explanation of that, there are multiple building codes in Massachusetts. The town of Milton has adopted what's referred to as the stretch code, which affects projects currently in Milton, additions, renovations, residential, commercial. The opt-in specialized code is for new residential and new commercial projects. Essentially, these are shooting for greater sustainability targets in new construction. The stretch code, which is already in place, affects renovations. Josh Eckhart-Lee, our assistant planner, Alex Hasha from Sustainable Milton, also a member of the Climate Action Planning Committee, Building Commissioner Joe Achu will be happy to answer questions, discuss this in much greater detail than I can. And then the next one that will be on the warrant is the citizens petition we've received, submitted related to a home rule petition that was approved by the Milton Town Meeting a few years ago to lower the speed limits on 28 and Canton Avenue. That bill hasn't been approved. It's been filed by Senator Timilty again. The citizens petition essentially asks town meeting to rescind its approval of that bill. So citizens petitions go on the warrant if they receive the requisite number of signatures. That will be included on the warrant. Not really approved for inclusion in the sense that there's no action by the select board on it. We received some other requests that haven't been acted upon, so I won't really speak to them much. I'll just keep you updated if anything happens on them. The main one obviously would be anything related to MBTA communities. We've received notice from the planning board chair that they anticipate having articles related to zoning and MBTA communities. And obviously we know with February 13th, things could be affected there. So it's essentially a placeholder at this point. We'll see where things stand in the week and adjust the warrant and working with the planning board to accommodate what they might have in mind there. And the other 3, I will follow up on if the select board discusses them. We haven't even discussed them at the select board level yet, so there's not much more to add there. The appropriation for the bylaw review committee, just as an aside, we have that as a request. It was approved last year. I expect to roll it into the boards and committees budget rather than as a separate article, but that just hasn't been finalized yet, so I'm just carrying it on the list so we don't lose track of that. And that's really it for warrant articles at this time. We have all the budget articles, we have those from the special town meeting, and we have the 2 I mentioned for the speed limit and for the specialized code.
Nick, that list that you just put up was great. Did you send that to us previously?
I thought I had, but I must not have. So I will send that out to you after this meeting. I'll send it to you and Karen for distribution.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's important for us to have a list of our warrant articles.
Yes.
I have found. Judy?
So curious question. One of the articles that did not get addressed at the December town meeting was a citizen petition. And if someone can help me with this, I think there's time limits for a citizen petition. Am I understanding that incorrectly?
Well, whether there is or isn't, all the articles that weren't acted upon by a vote of town meeting were moved to the May annual town meeting, so.
So that took
it's-
care of the, whatever time limits may be imposed on a citizen petition.
Yeah, that's the first I'm hearing of the question about time limits. I'll double check that with town council, but we're treating all of those articles the same. They were voted by town meeting to be moved to the May 2024 town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think
I'm confused. I think this-
procedurally, I think what they might have actually done is suspended the business of the town meeting until, so it's kind of like the town meeting business is just continued.
Right.
So in sort of like time, in the time meeting time, like 0 minutes have passed since, right?
Right,
So
right.
we'll bring it up and we will probably conduct a rehearing on those, probably, just to refresh everybody's recollection. And
Would we vote again?
we'll talk, I don't know. We'll talk about that.
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
All right. And definitely, we don't have discussion of these things as an agenda item tonight.
Correct.
So we probably should not get too in the weeds on that stuff
Okay,
now.
I was just
No, it's,
trying to keep it,
yeah, it's important. It's important for us to know what articles we need to address
okay.
on the warrant committee going into the annual town meeting, I have found.
I found that helpful.
All right, does anybody have any other questions for Nick? So it looks very doable, right?
Don't jinx us.
It ain't so bad, right? It ain't so bad.
I don't know.
I think it's time for us to strut our stuff, right? Thanks, Nick. Does anybody have any other questions?
No, nothing general.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us tonight, Nick. I'm sure we will follow this up a multitude of times.
Sounds good. And as I mentioned, obviously, department heads are available for folks who have questions about departmental budgets. We'll make sure everybody has access to those. If you need help accessing them or printing them, just let us know. We'll help you out with that. And then if you need help getting in touch with anybody, please don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email.
Thank you. All right, take care, Nick.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Nick.
And Amy just resent the, or somebody did you just resent the budget?
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think what we'll do is we'll get back together in a couple of weeks, okay? And I'll start reaching out to interested parties with things that are ready to go, and we'll start having presentations. I'm just going to look at my calendar real quick. Just mentally, March is warrant. Okay? Mentally, March is warrant. I think let's because school vacation is the week of the 19th,
Correct.
so that's bad.
Yes.
So how about tentatively, folks, let's look at Monday the 26th. Okay, for our kickoff. We'll start reaching out to people who are ready to go, start getting presentations, be ready to vote on things that are ready to, and then by then we should hopefully have an idea of what the town budget's going to be looking like, and then we can really start to dig into that.
When was the meeting with the select board? The 27th?
27th.
Following, so we'll have what's Nick presents to, Nick's presentation to the school committee, subcommittee,
Oh, yes,
What was
all
that?
of the,
You said the finance subcommittee.
the finance subcommittee.
there's many words in those two groups.
Yeah.
Select board
Board
subcommittee.
subcommittee, select board finance subcommittee, and the
School budget.
school
That's going to be a big
budget
one.
finance school committee,
He said he was targeting
the
his,
school. It was,
Yeah,
yeah,
215.
and he was targeting a balanced budget proposal by then.
correct.
And then this, again, I think we all got to look at this special energy code. I printed it out. It's huge. we should all watch all those meetings. I'm sure that the select board met numerous times and conducted detailed inquiry into this. It's 2 separate codes. It goes into every aspect of our building code. I'm sure that they went into great detail with this at MBTA, which we spent the last year on. So I think that in light of all that, we need to, go watch all those meetings I'm sure they had about these and got into the detail that we're going to have to get into. All
The
right?
select board meetings or that?
I mean,
Energy
this thing is
Commission.
huge if you've looked at this stuff. So, I mean, this isn't the kind of thing you look at and talk about for 4 minutes and put before the warrant committee. So I'm sure that there's a record out there that we need to review and be on top of because this is big, okay?
I'm sorry, is this clip thing that you have coming from the don't cook with gas people? Use your grill instead? I don't know.
It's about opt-in for special stretch energy code. I think it's basically.
Stretch.
it's
Why-
about
what
the
are we
It's your
stretching?
carbon footprint.
Carbon footprint.
Yeah, they want to go like net neutral on the carbon footprint for, it looks like construction. So again, let's not get into the details on that now. It's not on our
Where did you
agenda.
get that clipboard of?
We sent it out to everybody today.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah, we're
Just
not
got it.
discussing it today. so
I
it's-
just got it.
Just got it from Karen.
Go. Well, I find that
Okay?
helpful, thank you. To be able to
Tim.
Read it.
I was just, this enhanced stretch code,
Yep.
if you get into that, it's, being a contractor, it's not good for the
All right.
people building in the town. It's a
Thank-
disaster.
Yeah, I think
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It's not an agenda item for discussion for tonight.
No, I get it. I just.
Yep, I was just
wanted to
saying
put
that
in
we're gonna
people's
need,
heads.
everybody needs to start drilling down on this. And so I'll
Yep.
get out, what we'll do is we've got a tentative date. I will start, we'll start looking at budget, we'll start coming up with who's gonna look at the different departments. And so that hopefully by the time, we have the town budget and we know what we're looking at, then we can start getting together and drilling down on that. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Judy?
Who wants to volunteer to put together a list of the meetings that this was discussed, so? Well, I don't know.
We're at the very beginning of this.
Okay,
We're at the
well,
very beginning of this. All right. Anything else?
as you did
Does
say.
anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Is there any opposition?
No. Can I say no?
No hands raised. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.